All right, moving on. One of the key highlights of Prime Minister Modi's speech from the Red Fort was the announcement of next generation GST reforms. With President Trump's tariff drama at an all-time high, Prime Minister's announcement is a preemptive move to reduce the burden on Indian consumers and industry, while keeping an eye on the effect from President Trump's tariffs on the Indian economy. Following the Prime Minister's announcement, the Finance Ministry released details about the reform, saying that the ministry will further simplify the tax slabs and focus on three pillars, namely structural reforms, rate rationalization, and ease of living and conducting business. Before we dive into the debate, let's listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say about the next generation GST reforms during his speech.
दिवाली में आपकी डबल दिवाली का काम मैं करने वाला। इस दिवाली में आपको एक बहुत बड़ा तोहफा देशवासियों को मिलने वाला है। पिछले 8 साल से हमने जीएसटी का बहुत बड़ा रिफॉर्म किया। पूरे देश में टैक्स के बर्डन को कम किया, टैक्स की व्यवस्थाओं को सरल किया और 8 साल के बाद समय की मांग है कि हम एक बार उसको रिव्यू करें। हमने एक हाई पावर कमेटी को बिठा करके रिव्यू शुरू किया, राज्यों से भी विचार विमर्श किया और मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, हम नेक्स्ट जनरेशन जीएसटी रिफॉर्म्स लेकर के आ रहे हैं। ये दिवाली के अंदर आपके लिए तोहफा बन जाएंगे। सामान्य मानवीय की जरूरतों के टैक्स भारी मात्रा में कम कर दिए जाएंगे, बहुत बड़ी सुविधा बढ़ेगी। हमारे एमएसएमई, हमारे लघु उद्यमी, इनको बहुत बड़ा लाभ मिलेगा। रोजमर्रा की चीजें बहुत सस्ती हो जाएगी और उससे इकोनॉमी को भी एक नया बल मिलने वाला है।
All right, let's talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show at this point in time is Dr. Ajay Dua, former Congress Secretary, Senior Economist. Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us on the show. Mithali Nikore, Economist, also with us on the platform. And Mukul Gupta, Senior Partner, Sharnam Legal, former Chairman of the GST Committee on Tax Federation of India, also with us on the program. Professor Nalapat, I'll begin with you. Well, the GST reforms has been pending and due since a very, very long time. The Prime Minister has said that there are going to be some transformational reforms in the coming days. There's always been a call to reduce GST on a number of products, and that seems to be on the anvil now. Will that boost the economy? Will that boost spending? And is this also a counter to the kind of treatment India has received at the hands of the United States?
Well, you need to put the whole issue in a nutshell. The fact of the matter is that I must say that Prime Minister Modi roared like a lion during that speech, 105 minutes. I mean, I think that is the longest speech that he's ever made from the ramparts of the Red Fort. And one of the most welcome bits of news from there was this GST reform. You know, you've heard of vote getters. GST I've always regarded as a vote cutter because, quite frankly, some of the rates are a bit onerous, very much onerous in fact. As soon as you cross 20 lakhs, even by 10 rupees, the entire income is then subjected to GST. I mean, there needs to be a progression, that is income above that, rather than the entire income. There are so many other ways in which GST reforms are needed, and it's very, very good of the Prime Minister to do that. May I remind you, Vineet, that, when you have an import duty of 15, 20, for even 10% on gold, you have gold smugglers coming in, gold smuggling coming in. But if you lower the rate to around 5%, you will get more revenue and smuggling will stop, which is a huge benefit because it starves the smuggling industry of revenue and that kind of revenue may be misused in various ways, including by funding undesirable activities. So I've always believed that lower rates increase revenue rather than the other way around. And this plan of Prime Minister Modi, I mean, he sketched out the entire what he has done since 2014 and what he's planning to do while he is the Prime Minister. And I think it's a very impressive list. Now, GST reform is one part of it, and I'm sure over the next few years you're going to find major reforms in income tax and as well. So not to mention other regulations which industry may find irksome, including in regarding commerce. I mean, Dr. Dua is an expert on that. Dr. Nikore is another very distinguished expert. But I would like to say, I have long believed that lower rates yield more revenue. Maybe in the first year, no, definitely over 2 or 3 years. The problem with budgets, we're always with just 1 year in mind. You have a 1 year time span. Now the point is to take the long view, at least 3 years. If you do that, it's much better for the economy, much more better for the taxpayer, and frankly, it increases tax compliance. There's a lot of evasion of GST going on, I can tell you. A lot of evasion going on. You've got these duplicate bills where there's no GST, and they give you that when you want a bill, and then the reality is that the GST is evaded. So the lower rates are going to boost GST revenue rather than the other way around. Vineet.
Fair enough, sir. Let me also open Mr. Mukul Gupta into this conversation. Mr. Gupta, what to be expected from these reforms? This is something that the nation, the economy at large, economists at large have also been asking and demanding of the government.
This is a very welcome move at this point after 8 years of GST in place. Some reforms, usual things were being done every day, every month, every year. But now this, since the Prime Minister has given its next gen reforms for GST from the Lal Killa, so it must be very, I believe so that these reforms must be real reforms in GST, which is very, very much needed at this point. So all the aberrations, all the experience which the business or the government have got over these 8 years period should be corrected. So I believe the business, the general public must benefit out of it, as the Honorable Prime Minister has announced from these reforms. But to my mind, government is doing its best. The main problem is in the field. Both from the side of the government of bureaucracy, from the center as well as the state officials, as well as the business. So there need to be a change of mindset so that real benefit to the Indian economy should come by properly implementing the law. That is what I believe must be a part of this next gen reforms. Thank you.
Dr. Dua, your expectations of this exercise, and the Prime Minister obviously is hoping that internal spending, boosting of the economy, Atmanirbharta, all is basically a response to the kind of pressure that India has also been enduring at the hands of the American president.
Vineet, thank you for having me on the show. I think the Prime Minister's announcement today is most welcome for one, the reason which you mentioned about the pressurization being undertaken by President Trump and his administration on the Indian economy. But at the same time, I think after 8 years of experience or experimentation, and I shouldn't call it experimentation because it's come to stay, the constitutional amendments, etc., are all in position to have this tax going on. The 3 things I'd like to emphasize. One, that we have far too many slabs in our GST. Exempted 0%, 6%, 12%, 18%. The world over, there are no more than 1 or 2 slabs. Flat rate, reasonable, as Professor Nalapat mentioned, a reasonable rate fetches you as much revenue, if not more, than exorbitant high rates. Number 2 reason is we continue to levy a cess over and above the GST because of the compensation. It was a compensation cess to be given to the state governments who had taken a guarantee from the federal government in 2017 that for certain number of years, 5, any loss in income to them will be compensated by the federal government, and rather than pulling it out of its own share, they did it by levying an extra cess. Now the compensation period to the guaranteed compensation to the state government, that time is over, so the cess should also go. That is logical. A third one is with respect to the rates. While you can have high rates of 18% or even 18 plus cess on certain goods, what we call the sin goods, or the goods, which consumption of which public admits, the society, administrators of the society know that those are not desirable. Alcohol, tobacco, those kind of goods. We want to discourage their use. By all means, have the 18% rate. If necessary, hike it up because at the end of it, the day, the users of those items harm themselves, and in any case, they also become a drag on the state's resources, healthcare, and other things. But generally, by and large, I would say that GST is required to be moderated. They have a few items of exemption. You can increase the list, since the Prime Minister, and probably he has given an indication that the general public will find the burden on it being reduced. So that means the exemption list could be larger than what it is today. So I am of the opinion structural changes, time has come there after 8 years, and we must have them. And I'm sure when the Prime Minister of the country announces it from the Red Fort in his Independence Day speech, the state governments who are not yet on board in the GST Council, because the decision making with respect to GST is a joint one. All the states must be on board, or most of them, because the voting pattern has been also decided and how do the decisions get taken there, that they will get on board, and they will get on board only when they find that in the new scheme of things, they are not being impacted adversely. That means they continue to get what they are getting today. And for that, finally, I would say that then in this initial talk, that certain sectors of the economy still are out of GST. And it is necessary that no exemption of the sector as a whole should be given, and those 2 or 3 items which are outside, they must also, that those industries also should be taxed, and that includes, if I might say, tax on lawyers' fee. Advocates, tax fee of service are not liable to pay GST. A lawyer made the scheme, and the exemption beneficiaries were also there. Plus, of course, there was electricity, which was not taxed earlier. So I think all these industries and set of persons must get an equitable treatment and the tax imposed on them. Vineet.
Mithali, the slabs in itself have been under a lot of criticism and contention also since they came about 8 years ago, if I recall. Do you think there is going to be modification in that? Well, let's call it reduction.
No, absolutely, Vineet. I think for many, many years, and on your show, on your channel, we have been discussing, what are the ways in which we can have GST rationalization. There are a number of ideas that have been bandied about in all of this time. Of course, the rate rationalization is now inevitable. We will probably start to see fewer bans. We will start to see an easier process. I do think that one thing which I think very practically, as a MSME myself, I would say, is this entire business of predicting your future revenue, paying your tax even before you receive the payment from the client. It is absolutely preposterous, because even for me, I never know when is my client actually going to pay. But the minute I have a contract value in front of me, I have to pay the GST based on that contract value, even if the client is delaying payments. So I think for MSMEs, this puts maximum pressure on working capital. And if, for example, the client doesn't pay, then we get a GST refund maybe after 3, 4, even 6 months. So I think the entire process side of it, I mean, we are discussing a lot about rates. Reducing the number of rates is important, but at the same time, we have to discuss the process side of the GST reforms, making it easier to actually pay the tax, making it simpler to actually pay the tax. That has to happen. And I also think that today, the Prime Minister has spoken about a number of themes which I think deserve attention. The Prime Minister has spoken about the Viksit Bharat Task Force. The Prime Minister has spoken about the fact that we need to have a Viksit Rozgar Yojana, where the young people who are getting first-time jobs in the private sector will be given 15,000 rupees upon their joining a job in the private sector. He's spoken about the fact that we need to look at India's energy security and look at a hydrocarbons kind of mission, but also deep water exploration and nuclear energy to make India energy independent from the rest of the world. He's spoken about the fact that Make in India has to include defense equipment and defense manufacturing happening within the country. Plus, he has also spoken about women power and the fact that women should be leading and driving, the Nari Shakti emphasis coming back. So I think I really appreciated today that there were two themes that he really brought front and center. One was gender equality, and the other was renewable energy and green energy. These two themes, when you look at the global narrative of the Trump tariffs, were getting lost somewhere. And even in my discussions with a lot of international donors, they said, oh, these themes are getting de-emphasized, which for many years we've been fighting to front and center, the entire gender equality narrative, or the entire narrative around ensuring sufficient investments in renewable energy. And today, Prime Minister Modi has stood up as a global leader, standing in front of the world to say, India continues to prioritize, green energy. India continues to prioritize gender equality. And I think the message could not be louder, because at the end of the day, these two themes were starting to lose a global base of support. And even Indian companies had started saying, oh, diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental and social governance consideration, ESG.
Lost you there, Mithali. All right, let me take concluding thoughts from the rest of our panelists, starting with Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, your expectations from what the Prime Minister has said, and how is that likely to catapult India in terms of its economic growth, as well as the Philippine spending, which the government always focuses on?
Look, as far as Philippine spending is concerned, lower rates, higher revenue, and I quite agree with Mitali that it's very rare, frankly, to find clients that pay on time. So the minute an invoice is sent, you have to send your GST as well, even though the client may take months, years, sometimes never to give you that. And refunds is one thing, but quite honestly, the difficulty is that they have their own. They again take time. So I think, as has correctly been said, I think the Prime Minister is fixed on the process as well, and improving the process of administration. So I think we are looking, this entire speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort was actually signaling a huge reset in priorities and a huge reset in policy. And I think you'll find a lot of with new policies, possibly some new people as well coming in. And I think that's very welcome from the point of view of India, because the reality is this is our 21st century moment to become the third superpower of the world. If we lose this chance, the next chance may not come for a generation or even more than a generation. So the next 3 years or 4 years or 5 years are absolutely crucial, and we as Indians can only hope that Prime Minister Modi succeeds in his mission of making Bharat Viksit and a true 21st century example, including of governance and governance processes. Vineet.
Dr. Dua?
While fully agreed with what Professor Nalapat has said, I would emphasize that along with rationalization of the rates, slabs, and making them, rationalization by way of saying that optimizing them to at a lower level, I would like to see the enforcement machinery of the GST to then go cracking at people who, even at these low rates, are unwilling to pay. Our informal retailing is the biggest, I would say, offender in this. And as was pointed out by him earlier, you can full markets run on duplicate bills or so-called kacha bills, where no GST is paid. As a result, person who's required to pay ends up paying far more than the person's, the large universe which is kept outside. Yes, give lower rates, rationalize them, optimize them, whatever you want to call it, but make sure then that the base widens and everybody who's required to pay is actually compelled to pay. Otherwise, there are penalties, demonstrational penalties in the beginning, and thereafter, as a matter of routine, people will be hauled up if they do not comply. Reason, GST is the biggest source of revenue now in the country for the state governments. The property taxes, certain municipal corporations, municipal bodies, etc. There are, other than the GST, if we want the states to play an active role in the development of the country, more participation, more capex coming from them, etc., we have to make sure that the money which flows to them is the devolution of funds also takes place fairly and squarely.
Fair enough, sir. Mr. Gupta, concluding thoughts, sir. What expectations do you have from what the Prime Minister said?
I believe I'm always look forward the Prime Minister's approach as a very positive approach. So I have good hopes. He has already identified 3 pillars. And I think the last pillar, as has been mentioned by him, ease of business. Ease of business can only come when actually the implementation of the provisions of GST is made simplified. It is now digitally driven. So there are a lot of places where the interpretation of the law says something else than what the taxpayer is required on the digital platform. We have been identifying these issues and telling the government time and again about these issues, which creates confusion in the mind of the taxpayer that what is to do. So such type of grievances should be meted out and clarified, or actions must be taken as fast as possible to make the business run easy. As I told earlier also that in the third pillar, ease of doing business, our bureaucracy must play a more positive role. The mindset needs to be changed. This is a big reform for the country, which country took 8 years ago. Now this is next gen reform, as the Honorable Prime Minister have mentioned. So this must be a reform, not a simple some tweaking here or there. This should not be only confined to this. It must be taken as a reform which should really reap in benefits to the economy. Thank you.
All right, we've run out of time. We're going to take a short break. Appreciate everybody who joined us and weighed in on this important matter. We take a short break. Be right back.